Hey, what's up guys? It's Grant here. Hope all is well. So with my recent activity with creating an advanced keylogger in Python and then adding some features to that after some audience improvements, I've decided to create a small crash course pertaining to how I built the keylogger, my thought process, and just the overall implementation of what I did. As an FYI, before we get into this crash course, this isn't professionally written code, and I am not a very talented programmer slash coder, but the implementations that I used for the keylogger really haven't changed since the videos. Besides from that, there is free downloadable notes that you can download. These notes are a little bit different than just a complete set of notes. They are a springboard. They offer a springboard for you to create your own version of the keylogger before you try looking at the crash course, so that you can actually go through the application portion, because oftentimes that is really important. If you can apply what you're learning instead of just following a random course instructor, you're really going to get a better benefit out of the resource. So there are notes in the description below that are freely downloadable. I hope you guys enjoy the crash course, and without further ado, let's transition onto how I thought of the project and what my thinking approach was. Before we start this course, I have a few recommendations or prerequisites that I recommend that you do and follow before getting into the crash course content. The first thing is to make sure that you have Python 3 installed. I am using Python 3.7, but the latest version, Python 3.8, will work. The next thing is to make sure you have a text editor that you can write your Python code in, whether that's just the default IDLE that you will use. I am using PyCharm. You can reference the downloadable notes if you need help with installations of PyCharm for instructions. And number 3 is to make sure that you have some of the Python basics down. I will not be going through the very basics of Python throughout this course. So for instance, I am going to assume that you know what a loop is, or a variable, or a list, for example. There are tons of free resources and courses, and I'll link a few in the description below. For the Python basics, I recommend you either look at Edie Eureka's crash course on YouTube. It's about an hour and 30 minutes long, which is free, or there is a very cheap course, Python Basics, which is geared towards the cybersecurity perspective by Christy Zott, who is an information security professional. He has a course on Udemy that you can buy. So you follow any type of resource, but just make sure that you have the Python Basics down. As I have said before, just a quick heads up, I am not a professional coder or a programmer. So there are always improvements to be made to my code, of course. And also, in addition, one of the big downsides of Python is the ease of turning your programs into workable executables. Python isn't very good at this. I do leave you with the resources you need to put this keylogger into an executable, but I do not directly do it on this crash course. So just make sure that, just a heads up, that we aren't going to be putting this into an executable. And in addition, this is flagged by antivirus. So even if you were to put this into an executable, you would have to work around antivirus. This is more about just developing code and functionalities within Python and the approach that I had. Speaking of how I approached this project, really the way I approached this project was I wanted to create a keylogger which was a bit more advanced than the one I had created before last summer. So I had created a basic keylogger from a Python cybersecurity course, and it was a very simple and popular implementation for the keylogger in Python. So if you look up like Python keylogger on YouTube or on Google, you often will see this simple implementation of the keylogger written in Python. I knew Python had the ability to easily integrate more features because of its extensive access to libraries or modules or whatever you want to call them. So after conducting a bit of research on additional features for the Keylogger, I looked at a few other courses out there and some suggestions like Quora. I decided to go ahead and use Python as the language that I would write as my implementation. So what I like to do with my projects when it comes to building, whether it's a small scale, large scale project, is perform what I like to call, just a basic research phase. And so I research in this time for potential libraries that I would use for my features, common implementations, maybe like what was previously used, or checking GitHub, and break up my project into steps after performing this basic research. So I wrote down my Keylogger features as well as some potential libraries that I could use on a document. I then went about creating a little outlined diagram that I would use, which would be offer as a guide to help build the Keylogger. And I broke down my features into chunks so that I could have clarity on what I wanted to complete for each step. Now, I understand it's not every project where you're going to know exactly what you're going to do or what the end goal is, but having an end goal result or end goal in mind and performing some basic research before diving into it directly is really going to help you direct you in a way that it's going to make it easier to break down the project into foreseeable chunks so that you don't get overwhelmed or you don't know where to start. Breaking it down into steps is what I love to do when it comes to approaching a project. So with all of this out of the way, it is time finally to develop the advanced keylogger in Python. All right, let's get started with this keylogger. To start, we will first open up a PyCharm project. So we are double-clicking PyCharm. And here we have this. We will create a brand new project. Save your project to any location. And wait for the project to load. Okay, once the project has loaded and everything is loaded up, we are going to be creating two new directories directly under our main folder. So let's go ahead and create the first new directory, which will be called Python, or project rather, not Python. And the next directory will be called cryptography. Now we are going to create our first Python file directly under the project directory. So do new Python file and call it whatever you want to call it, but I will call this Keylogger. Click OK and let it load. Now, before we start typing any code, we need to go ahead and add some imports or some modules or libraries or packages or third-party whatever. There's so many names for them. So basically, to do this, to import modules, there are multiple ways. The first way is to use pip, and we can use pip directly through our terminal in PyCharm. So you can use pip install and then the package name if you have pip installed on your computer. You can also do this through the command prompt if you wanted to, so you could use pip install and directly install it from here. Now, pip is great and it's very easy to use, but oftentimes there is permission errors and the modules that get downloaded go into certain directories, and so it's kind of hard to manage where these libraries are getting installed and if they can be globally accessible throughout the computer. Sometimes you have a error where you can access the module on this project, but let's say you were to open up a new project, it says it's not on there, but it's installed. So it's kind of complicated. And so to work around this, and for the sakes of simplicity, even though pip is widely used, we will be working or directly importing each of our imports through this PyCharm project. To do that, all we have to do is go to File Settings, under Project click Project Interpreter. You will see pip and setup tools, and these are our packages right now that are in the default or the project that we created. So to add our new module, click the plus sign, and up here we have a search bar, and we can search for any of the modules that we want. So I have in the guide the modules that we need to directly download through this process right here. So starting with py-win32, all we have to do is press py32, click the correct name, and click Install Package. Once the module has been successfully installed, you will see this green success bar, and it is successfully installed. So I'm going to go ahead and import all of these, just follow the same exact process where we will type in the next module name and click Install Package. And I'm going to do this for all of these modules right here. So go ahead and do that, and I'm going to skip forward because it's a little bit tedious to do this. Once we have added all of the Python modules that were specified in the document, we can go ahead and exit out of the available packages, and you will see all of our imports here. So these are the modules that we just imported, are the third-party libraries, and we'll be using these to add our features to the advanced keylogger. So go ahead and click OK. Okay, so now we can go ahead and add our libraries to the Keylogger project, and this keylogger.py is our main file. Now, if you were going to be developing this in real time, meaning like you're going to develop it on your own and it was going to be something where you did it by yourself, you weren't following a guide, you would probably be importing these libraries as you go, as you add new features, as you add new code. But since we know exactly what we're doing, and I've already gone through the process of doing that, we are going to go ahead and import all of the libraries right now. So let's go ahead and do that. To start out, we will go ahead and create our first comments, and we'll call these libraries to make sure we have that specified and organized. Then we will go ahead and start importing all of our libraries. So let's go ahead and do this, and yeah, let's just do this. So our first set of libraries is some email libraries so that we can add our email features. So let's go ahead and add all of these and just type them as you see on the screen. Okay, so here are our first set of libraries. We've imported four from our email and the SMTP lib. The next one will be some default modules or libraries that we will use for collecting computer information. These are our two that we will be using to collect information. And now it's time to get the clipboard. We will also go ahead and grab our keystrokes with the PyInput library. We will import some system information to track the time, so this includes the time module and the OS module. We will also For our microphone capabilities, we have to import two modules, sound device and the skippy.io.wav file. Uh-oh. I think I forgot to import sound device. To encrypt our files, we will be using the cryptography library. We will be also using the get pass information to get the username and the requests library to get some more computer information. And finally, to add our screenshot functionality, we will be using the multi-processing freeze support to only take one screenshot at a time. And from the pillow module, we will be importing image grab. And these are all of the libraries that we will be using for the advanced keylogger. So each of these modules adds a certain functionality and gives us access to code, which allows us to do or perform certain things. Now you may be wondering, Grant, like Grant, what do you like? How do you get all these libraries? Like, what did you even do to look these up? I have no idea what any of these are. What did you do? So, what I did was I basically just went to google.com, said how to get screenshots from Python library, and the most popular one that came up was from the pillow module in a subsection which was called image grab. And so I did this for all of these libraries. I just looked up like how to get clipboard information library module for Python, and it came up with Win32 clipboard. And there's multiple modules for the same functionality. And oftentimes it's just a matter of parsing through the one that works the best for your capabilities and just using that library. So we have our libraries created or imported into our main project, and it is finally time to get started writing some code. The first segment that we will be creating is the keylogger itself. As you know by now, a keylogger logs keys. To log keys in Python, we will be using the pynput or pynput keyboard module or library. There was two important imports that we imported from pynput: the key and the listener. The key logs the key and the listener listens for each key typed on the keyboard. Before we get started with logging keys, let's create two default variables. The first variable that we will be creating is the keylog.txt log file. This is where all keys that are logged are going to be appended to. So let's go ahead and create a default variable so that we don't have to keep writing keys_log.txt every single time. Our next default variable that we will create is the file path itself. This is where our keylog.txt file will be stored. For now, for simplicity's sakes and to make it convenient on us, I'm just going to be using this directory right here. Instead of having to figure out where all of this is, all we have to do is right-click the directory, say copy path, and we can paste it in here, and there is our path. and make sure to add double backslashes per each backslash so that is an escape sequence. Finally, we will add one little tidbit for the file path so that we can access our keylog.txt file. So we will add the extend, which will allow us to add an extension right here, and then we can access our keylog.txt. When I created this keylogger, when I was in the process of creating this keylogger, I looked online for any tutorials that had to do with PY input to see if I could find some sort of way to easily implement and log the keys. I stumbled upon a YouTube tutorial on freecodecamp.org that was created by Tech with Tim, and he creates a basic keylogger with Python using the PY input module that we are using. So from this tutorial and a little bit more of research and based off of some inspiration, I went ahead and implemented a very simple and very similar implementation to with what Tech with Tim shows. So if you want a better explanation, Tech with Tim is a fantastic explainer of code. You will gain a little bit of a better understanding using this tutorial. Basically, I do the same exact thing. PY input makes logging keys in Python relatively simple. In order to get started with logging keys, we will first create 3 functions and also open up the listener so that we can append each key to the log file. So let's go ahead and define some constant variables, starting out with count, and we will set that equal to 0. We will also create a new empty list called keys, where each key will be appended to the list, but it's empty for now. Okay, so now it's time to start with our first function, which is on press. We will be taking the parameter key so that we can log each key. So type in key. Let's create some default global variables so that they can be accessible within the entire function. So we're going to create 3 keys, count. Oh, actually, we're doing 2. Wow, I suck at tutorials. Sorry, oh man. Anyway, we're going to be doing 2 global variables, keys and count, not 3. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is, if you want to output each key that is typed onto the screen of PyCharm, we can simply type print key, and that will print each key. The next thing that we will want to do is append each key to our empty list, as I said before. So let's go ahead and do that. And to do this, we simply just type in keys.append each key. After we have appended this key to the keys list, we are going to increase our key count by 1. The next function that we will be creating is the write files function, which is going to write the keys to a specific file that we specified, which is going to be the key_log.txt. So let's go ahead and create this new function. And we were going to take the parameter keys. Let's go ahead and open up our file so that we can start appending some data to the file, specifically the keys in this case. To do this, we will use the with followed by the open block, our file path plus the extension plus the keys information. And we want to append all new data. We don't want to write it. If we wrote it, basically every single time that we would reopen the file, everything would be deleted. So we want to append each key, so we will be using the A for append. and we will call this F, the file F that we are opening. Now, the following section that I'm about to describe here is completely up to you if you want to do this, but for me personally, I want to make my keylog.txt file pretty readable, so that it's pretty easy to read and gather information relatively quickly. So, we are going to be doing a few modifications within the keys so that it looks a little bit better. Let's go ahead and loop through each of the keys within the list that we appended. So for key, so for each key in the keys list, we're going to be looking for or checking specific, basically instructions for modification. The first thing that we want to do is replace every single quote with nothing, so that when we have, for instance, let's say it was HEL. So each time that py input logs a key, it has those single quotes in between. And we don't necessarily want this because it just makes it look a little different. So we can go ahead and quickly replace each single quote with a blank line or nothing, so that it will look like that. So to do this, we will create a new variable, and first we will convert our key to a string, and we will replace, whoops, don't do that. We will replace each single quote with nothing. Now we're good. The next thing that I wanted to do within this process is make it each word readable on a different line. Reason being, it's just easier to read throughout each line, and it makes it a little bit harder if you don't parse through the spaces. So what I did was I did key.find space. So if there is a space or the spacebar is typed and that is greater than 0, we create a new line. So every single time the spacebar is entered, a new line is created. And we close the file. The next function that we are going to write is onRelease. We don't necessarily have to write this function, but this function really helps us if we want to actually exit out of the keylogger. So let's go ahead and define onRelease, and we will also be taking in a key parameter. We're going to be checking if a certain key value equals something. So if the key equals key.esc, or the escape key is entered, return false. What this will do is it will exit our keylogger. Finally, let's open up the listener block, which listens for each key and implements our three functions together. To do this, we'll use the with listener on press, and we will define this as on press. So we're basically defining the value on press is equal to our function that we wrote on press, and on release. So the value of on release is going to be the function that we created, which is on release, obviously. And we're going to call this as listener.join, which joins our keys together. Before we run this code, there is one more little thing that we must implement. In order to continue to add new keys to the log file, we are going to be adding an if statement. So you see that we have this count variable here. So if we do if count is greater than or equal to 1, we're going to reset the count variable to 0, and we're going to write the list keys to the keylog.txt log file, and then we will create a new list called keys with empty. It will just be an empty list. So this just helps us better organize our keylog.txt file. Finally, before we run the keylogger, we have to add another if statement within our write file function. We are going to expand this if statement using elif. And we are going to be checking the value of each key and writing the key to the file and then closing the log file. Now if we go ahead and click play and let's go ahead and write hello world, the first thing you will see is our characters being outputted because of this line right here on line 41. And if we stop the keylogger and go to our keylog.txt, you will see hello world, and I was just testing something before this little recording, so but yeah, you will see hello world here and you're good to go. So we have the basic keylogger working, and now it's time to move on and start adding some different features to this keylogger, or I guess spyware-like features. So let's just go ahead and get started with that. The next feature that we will be adding to our keylogger is email functionality. So let's say we wanted to take all of these keys, so the keylog.txt file, and we wanted to send this to our email so that we can access the keys. We have to add some email functionality to it. Now, when I was creating the keylogger, I didn't really necessarily know how to go about doing this, but I found this really easy tutorial by geeksforgeeks.org that shows you how to not only send email, but add an attachment. So, for instance, the log file, add the keys log file attachment to our email so that we can access the email. We use SMTP Gmail for our service, so we're using gmail.com. And yeah, so let's go ahead and implement this function into our keylogger. Alright, so we are going to now create this send email function, which allows us to send different emails. To do this, all I'm going to do is just do this, and copy, and let's just paste this somewhere, and okay, cool, we're done. I'm just joking. We're actually not going to do that. We're going to go through it line by line, but we're going to be using a very, very similar template to what Geeks for Geeks has done here. So let's go ahead and do this. And if you couldn't tell, that was humor. I don't know. I'm trying to make this like a better tutorial, but alright, so let's go ahead and create the next function, which is going to be the send email function. We are going to be creating this function with 3 different parameters. We will call it send email. The first parameter we will use is the file name that we want to send, followed by the attachment, and finally for the to address. So which address we want, we can assign the address where we want to send it. Alright, so let's go ahead and create these defaults. We're going to need 3 of them. The first one is the email address that we are going to be sending from. For me, I'm going to be using a disposable Gmail account or a trash one that isn't used for anything else. I would highly advise that you do the same. Don't use something or a personal Gmail account. Use something that is just create a new one if you want to. So call this complete. Next is the password for this Gmail address. I'm exposing my password. And finally, we will need a to address, and this can be anything. This could be the same email address you're sending from. It could be a temporary email address that you want to put in here. That's why I have this parameter or this variable here, so that we can change it whenever we want to. So if we wanted to create a mailinator account or a temp mail account and have some temporary email address, we could do that. For me, I'm just going to put the same email address in here. Alright, our default variables are now finished, and it's time to create our send email function. So the first thing that we will need to do is define our from address, so the sending address, so that we can incorporate basically our email address parameter, or sorry, our variable that we just created. So we're sending from which email address? Well, we're sending from this email address, so we're just incorporating it within the function. Next thing we are going to do is start with the creation of our message using the MIME or multi-internet mail extensions. Totally did not look that up. Internet protocol, which allows us to format email messages to support character texts and email attachments, videos, audio, images. So it is a way for us to incorporate our attachments. Let's go ahead and create this new message. And we will add our first MIME multipart. Next three variables that we will be creating are our from, to, and subject handles, so that we can have the from address, to address, and of course the subject. So first is the from, and we are going to define this using our message that we just defined, and we're going to be incorporating our from address variable. Next is our to address. And we will be using the to address parameter that we defined up above. And finally, our subject. If you wanted to, you could call this subject anywhere, anything. You could even add an additional parameter and call it, whatever, subject here. And you could have a specific subject for each email that you send. But for me, I just like to keep it simple, and we'll just keep it saying log file. Alright, so now we have to create the body of the email, and to do this we have to first define a body or a string so that we can attach it to the email. So this can be anything, but I'm just going to keep it simple, body of the mail. So every single time an email is sent, you will see the body of the mail in the body of the email. Then let's attach this body to the message. To do this, we will use the message.attach method, followed by our multi-internet MIME text there, and we will attach our body, and we will keep it as plain format. Okay. The next few variables that we will be defining here are going to be the attachment. So let's go ahead and first define what we will be attaching. So up above we had a file name, and we are going to be calling file name equal to itself, file name. And we are going to be creating our attachment, and we will open up the attachment wherever that is at, and we will read the binary, so we will read the attachment. Next, we need to create the MIME base. I will create this as P and do MIME base application octet stream. So these are just some default default settings that we add to our MIME base here. This is just a very default line of code. Next thing that we will do is encode our message. So we'll do p.setPayload attachment followed by reading. So we will read the attachment. And then we have to finish our encoding by encoding it with base 64. And boom, there we go. Okay, we're almost done. We have to add a header, we have to attach the message, and then we can start up an instance, log into our Gmail account, and send the mail. So let's first add our header by doing p.add_header. So this will be the email header. I will just use it, what Geeks for Geeks had in our attachment has the file name. Let's go ahead and attach P to our message. And now we can start to create the SMTP session. So I will define a new variable called S, and we will be using the smtp.lib.smtp followed by our defining the SMTP server and the port that we will use to access Gmail, which will be 587. It's typically used for this type of purpose, so yeah. Next is starting up our TLS. We must secure what we are trying to, steal. So we will create a TLS session, and now it's time to finally log in to our Gmail address with our from address and password. Then we need to make sure that we can convert the multi-part message into a string so that it is able to send. So we will just do text message.asString to convert to string. And finally, we will send our email by doing send mail followed by the from address to address and our text, and we will quit our session. I didn't do a great job of explaining all of this. A lot of this is very default. You will see this when you're trying to incorporate the SMTP library as well as our email libraries or modules here. So we can go ahead and test this real quick by creating or defining an instance, and let's say we wanted to attach our keylog text file. To do this, all we have to do is first define our file name, followed by where this file name or where this file is located. So we have to incorporate the full extension. And the to address, we already have that defined. And there we go, we're good to go. So if we click play here and wait for 1 second, and let's just say we stop that. And if you wait a few minutes later, we will have our first email that is sent to us with our key log, which just has a whole bunch of stupid keys. But yeah, so we got this function to work, and it is now time to move on to our next part, which is getting the computer information. To get computer information, we are going to be using multiple libraries or modules that we have imported and using the methods to get specific information, including like the processor, system, the machine, the host name, and the private IP address, and also trying to query for the public IP address. As you can probably tell by now, we have kind of our variables right here, which act as the controls, are the defaults for the entire keylogger. So we're going to create yet again another default variable, which is going to create a new file for us, which is going to be the system information. So let's go ahead and do this. Create a new variable called system information, followed by whatever we want our the file to be called. I'm just going to call it systeminfo.txt. And let's go ahead and exit out of our send email, or minimize that, and append a new function between the keylogger and the send email function. For this one, we are going to be calling it computer information. And the first thing that we are going to do is open up our systeminfo.txt file with the with open block. So with open file path plus extend plus system information, and we are going to append to our file, and we will call this F. First thing that we will do is use the socket.getHostName to get the host name. So let's create a new variable and call it host name. Oops. Followed by socket.getHostName. And let's get the IP address by using the socket.getHostByName. And the host name, we will be using the host name variable there. Okay, now when I was first creating this keylogger, I did not create a way or a means of me getting my public IP address. I just got the private IP address. But with a few edits and suggestions from the audience, there was a way that I could try to find the public IP address. And to do this, we will be using appify.org. Now, appify.org only allows you to query their service a certain amount of times, and after that happens, let's say after 3 times, it shuts down, and that will ruin the functionality of our keylogger. So in order to limit the ability for us to stop or halt the keylogger, we will be using a try except block. So we are going to try to get the public IP. So let's go ahead and write try followed by a public IP variable, and we will simply use the get and the web URL appify.org, and we will convert that to text. So what we're doing here is defining the public IP variable, and we are using the get function to get some certain information, and we're converting that into text. And we will write our public IP to the log file. So I'm just going to organize this by using the public address followed by appending the public IP. And we're good. So if we are successful in our query, we can get our public IP. However, if we aren't successful, we are going to accept any exception, any and all exception, and we will write an error message saying couldn't get public IP address, most likely max query. So this time, if the query is not successful and it blocks us, we will accept any exception and we will write an error message to our log file. Alright, now it's time to get some other information, including the processor information, the system information, machine, hostname, and private IP address. Let's go ahead and get our processor information, and to do a lot of this, we will be using the platform module, followed by some specific methods within this library or module. So we are going to first write to our file the processor information. Now, why even get the processor information? Well, why not, I guess. If you're extracting information, why not get as much information as you want? But this could just give you an insight into maybe how powerful the machine is, or if there's any vulnerabilities for this particular processor. So that's the reason why I would get the processor information. To get the processor information, all we have to do is simply use the platform dot processor information, and that will get our processor information. Keep saying processor. And let's create a new line. So our next setting, or yeah, thing will be there. That's bad grammar. Okay, the next thing we will get is the system information, including the version. So like the Windows version, if this is a Windows machine. And we will organize this by system, and we will add platform.system, and also add a blank line in the platform. Oops. And like we did for the prior one above, we will add a new line. There we go. Oops. And of course, make sure to add that. Awesome. Next thing we will get is the machine information. Again, we will be using the method.machine from the platform library. You can see how handy Python really comes when it comes to importing different dependencies and libraries and just simply using their methods that have already been defined. So we'll use platform.machine followed by creating our new line. And let's write our host name, which we got up here. So we can just do f.write host name followed by our host name and append a new line. And finally, let's go ahead and write our private IP address, which we got up here. So if you were like on a university network when I was at the time of writing this keylogger, oftentimes the IP address is the same. So like they use this in order to track you. So if you were, let's say, targeting someone on a university network, this would help you and allow you to get their private IP address, which then you can sign into their network and target their IP address with whatever you want to do. So that's why I have this option here. And there we are. We have our computer information. So if we go ahead and define computer information, and we call this a function, we will hopefully get a new file called systeminfo.txt, and it will gain all of our information of our system. We're just going to wait a moment here, let it send an email. And as you can see, we now have our system information followed by everything that we need here. So awesome, we have what we need in terms of getting our system information. The next thing that we will be doing is getting our clipboard. So if we, let's say, we're copying and pasting passwords, email addresses, important information, we can get the clipboard information from this individual that we are targeting. So let's get that now. Okay, let's go ahead and get the clipboard information. We are going to insert this function between our keylogger and our computer information function. So let's go ahead and create a new function called copy clipboard. And we are going to take no clipboard contents, or no parameters rather. Before we continue on with this, let's go up to our controls and create a default variable for our clipboard information. We can call this whatever we want, but I will keep it uniform with the others and call it clipboard underscore information followed by the clipboard txt file. You can name it whatever you want to name it. That is the name that I am going to give it. Okay, so we have imported the Win32 clipboard, which is a submodule of pwin32. So all we have to do is work with the let's see here, the Win32 clipboard to get what we want with the clipboard. So let's go ahead and first open up the file by using the with open block followed by our file path, extension, and the clipboard information. We will be appending to this file and we'll call it F, just like any other file that we open. Okay, so there's two instances for a clipboard. You have text or string, which could be used to copy. So you could copy this right here, or you could copy like a PowerPoint file or a image or an audio clip. And so because for simplicity's sake and because it's very limited in terms of what you can do, we are just going to be appending strings to our little .txt file. So we are going to create a try except block. First, we will start with our try block, and the first thing we'll do is use the .open clipboard method to open the clipboard. Next thing we will want to do is type in pasted underscore data, or whatever the variable name we want to call it. And this is where we actually get our clipboard information. So we will be using the clipboard data method to get the contents in our clipboard. Then we will close our clipboard with the close clipboard method. And finally, let's go ahead and write this data to our clipboard.txt log file. There we go. So we can get the contents if the contents are a string. But let's say this is an image, or the individual that we are targeting has copied an image, audio file, or some sort of other file that isn't a string. We want to make sure that our keylogger doesn't stop. So to do this, we will just do except followed by f.write an error message. And for simplicity's sake, of course, we will write clipboard could not be copied. And we're done. So now we can get the clipboard information. And to quickly test this, all we have to do is call our clipboard right there, and let's see if this works. We should see a clipboard.txt file up here. And there we are. We have our clipboard with a Google Docs string URL. So that is the clipboard, and that's pretty easy to get. It was a pretty easy thing to do with the Win32 clipboard module. The next thing we will do now, finally, is start working on getting our recording of the microphone if it's on, and we will be getting a screenshot as well, so that we can figure out what the person maybe is looking at, whether that's maybe a Facebook account, bank account, or whatever it is. So let's go ahead and start on the microphone. To get the microphone, we imported two important modules or libraries. We have the skippy.io WAV file and the sound device. We will use both of these to collect the contents of the microphone so that we can record maybe what's going on if someone, is talking to another person on the phone, or whatever it is. So to do this, we are going to insert it between our key log here and our copy clipboard. And let's go ahead and create our next function, and we will call this microphone. We'll take no parameters. The first thing that we want to set is the sampling frequency, and the common sampling frequency is 44,100 hertz. So we just need to set this to a default variable named fs, or whatever you want to call it. For me, I call it fs here. Next thing we want to do is specify the amount of seconds we want to record for the microphone. So, we could do a minute, we could do 10 minutes, we could do 10 hours, but it doesn't really matter. So right now I'm just going to type seconds microphone underscore time. And let's go ahead and define the microphone time variable in our default controls. We'll just give it 10 for now. Okay, so now let's go ahead and use the sound device module to record our microphone. And to do this, let's create a variable called myRecording, which will store our recording. And we are going to be using the .rec method within the sound device library. So .rec, and we must convert our seconds into our sampling frequency, as well as set the sample rate equal to fs that we specified and channels equal to 2. Then we will wait for the recording to take place. And finally, we are going to write this to a .wav file, hence why we imported skippy.io. So let's go ahead and do that. Do write file path plus extend plus, we will call this audio information, the frame sampling, and as well as the my recording, so we can attach that. Let's go ahead and create our audio information right here. So let's go up here, call this audio information, and we will call this audio, and make sure to have the .wav or WAV for our extension. So if we play this, we will get a recording of what is going on for hopefully 10 seconds. Awesome. As you can see, I just recorded for 10 seconds and we have the audio.wav file up here. So we are making some good progress with our keylogger. Next thing we will do is get the screenshot information, or get a screenshot of what is going on the screen. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so for the screenshot, we will, once again, like by convention by now, what we're doing is creating a function for each feature. We will go ahead and create our screenshot function. No parameters for this function as well. This is a pretty easy little library to work with. We imported the image grab functionality from the pillow module. So all we have to do is define a variable followed by the image grab method to grab the image. So I'm just going to call this im and use the image grab, and there we go, we have grabbed an image. Now we need to save this to a certain file path, and we will use our practice file path plus extend plus screenshot underscore information. And let's go ahead and add this into our default control. Make sure to add the .png extension. So now if we were to run this, and let's go ahead and disable our microphone for now so we don't have to worry about that, you will see a screenshot pop up in this path. And as you can tell, we do now have a screenshot that just was taken. Awesome. Let's go ahead and add a timer function to our keylogger so that every certain amount of iteration or time, we take the steps of copying the clipboard, gaining more keystrokes, getting the screenshots, and maybe recording the microphone. So, you know, we want to do this every few, let's just say, minutes or hours, depending on how long you want to run the keylogger. So to do this, of course, there's multiple ways to implement this, but the way that I did this was by adding the time function to our to the keylogger, and then implement some of the features for the time function. Here at our account, we are going to go ahead and add above a few time controls so that the keylogger can iterate through the features. To do this, we will have 3 default variables. We'll have the number of iterations, and this will be always set to 0. So think of this as your base value for your counter. Then we will have the current time, which will get the current time of when the keylogger is launched and created. So it will update every so often eventually, as you'll see in a minute here. So to get current time, you just do time.time. And finally, to get the stopping time, we can do stopping time equals time dot time plus time underscore iteration. So what this does is every single time that we want to, let's say, go through each of the features of the keylogger, we can get the current time and then we add the current time plus the stopping time. So let's go ahead and add our time iteration up here to our default controls. So let's say we wanted to have each iteration go on for, I don't know, 15 seconds, then we can just write 15 and we have that there. The next thing that we will do is go ahead and add a while loop, which will query for really the number of iterations that we want to go through. So let's say we want to do 5,000 iterations of each feature at 15 seconds. That's what this while statement will look for. So to write a while statement, we'll do while number of iterations is less than number of iterations end. We will do the following things for the keylogger. So highlight all of the keylogger features and press tab for PyCharm to go ahead and indent that. And we have a number of iterations, and let's go ahead and define this up here above. Let's say we wanted to do this 3 iterations, so we'll have 3 iterations at 15 seconds each for each feature, so 15 seconds will be allocated. Okay, so there's a few things we have to do in our keylogger to edit it. So the first thing that we are going to want to do is add the current time variable into our global variable, this statement right here under the on press. And what we're going to want to do is create a current time right here and get the current time at this position and time. So every single time a key is pressed, we'll have that current time being queried. The next thing we will have to do is go under the define on release, and we're going to be creating a new exit statement. So if the current time is greater than the stopping time at this point, we want to exit out of our keylogger so that we can go ahead and take those keys from the log file and send it to our email. So we can do return false, and boom. Now we have stopped the keylogger. And finally, before we are finished, we are going to go ahead and do a little bit more of adding a little bit more to our timer. So the next thing that we need to do is check if the current time is greater than the stopping time for the rest of the features. This right here does it for the key logs itself, so think of it as just the keylogger right here. But we need to check if the current time is greater than the stopping time so that we can do the other features as well and send out emails. So we'll go ahead and write a similar statement to the one right here. So if current time is greater than stopping time, and we want to do a few different things. The first thing that we're going to want to do is clear out the entire logs for the keys information. The reason why we want to do this is so that we can have a new clean file for the keylog, and we won't have the previous keylogs that have already been logged. So we will do a with open file path plus extend plus keys information, and we will add the write block to that. We want to clear the contents, and we'll open that as the file name f, and simply do f.write, and we will literally just do a empty string. So now we are appending a empty string to the file and clearing the contents. In addition, we want to go ahead and start getting some of the features. So the first thing that we want to do is get the screenshot. So simply with our function, we can do the screenshot. And then we want to go ahead and email this screenshot to our email. So we'll do the screenshot information as our file name. The attachment is the file path, so the file path where the screen information file exists. And the to address, it can be any address you want to get. Next thing we want to do is go ahead and copy the clipboard contents. To do that, we just have to simply type copy clipboard. And we want to increase the number of iterations to 1. So this is going to now add to the number of iterations 1 up here. And we want to go ahead and update our time as well. So let's go ahead and do time.time, and stopping time equals time.time plus time iteration. Now, we will be adding some more features or sending the rest of the files after we have encrypted. So our timer function is now complete. So each time that we want to have this keylogger go through each feature, we can have it go through each feature 15 times for 5,000 iterations, and I don't know how long that would take. Well, I mean, you could just do 15 times 5,000, but you get the point. So yeah, this is the timer function. Now let's move on to encryption. Okay, for encryption, why would we even encrypt our files in the first place? Well, let's say we wanted to obfuscate our files on the victim machine, and we didn't want the victim to find out what the heck we were doing. I mean, if you had a log with all of your passwords and the website you visited and things like that, you're going to be a little bit taken aback, and you're going to probably take some precautions to try to remove this keylogger as soon as possible. But if you have something that looks like it's just random strings of data, the average user probably isn't going to look around and do much for it. So that's why we have encryption, and really, honestly, we have already encrypted our information right here. So, or not encrypted our information, but we have downloaded or imported a module which will allow us to encrypt certain files. So the first thing that we are going to want to do is actually create our list with the regular files, and then we're going to want to create a list with the encrypted files. So before we do that, let's go up to our default controls. And as you can see, we have all of these text files right here. And what we'll want to do is go ahead and create the encryption for the files that have that .txt extension. So the keys information, the system information, and the clipboard information are all going to be encrypted. These will not be. So what I did when I was creating this keylogger is just add the simple e and also do the e key log.txt. Now, if you wanted to obfuscate and make this look hidden, you would name this something completely different, but for demonstration purposes, it doesn't really matter. So we'll do this for all 3 of them. And finally, the clipboard. And make sure to add our A here, of course. E. Okay. Let's go back down. And, oh, actually, before that. Also, as a means for us to help us out with our list, I guess I probably should have done this pretty early. Right under our file path and extend, I'm going to have a file merge, which is just going to combine our file path and our extension, so we don't have to keep writing file path past extend plus the file. So file merge equals file path plus extend, but this will be easier for us now that we're creating these lists. Alright, so we're at the bottom here, and we are going to create 2 lists, files to encrypt and encrypted file names. So let's go ahead and first start out with the first list, files to encrypt. And we are going to create an empty list here, and we will query three or have three different files that we want to encrypt. Obviously, we want to encrypt the system information, clipboard, and keys information. So to do this, all we have to do now is finally click file merge plus system information, the regular system information, file merge plus the clipboard information, and finally file merge plus the keys information. So those are the files that we want to encrypt. Now we want to have the encrypted file names into a list so that we can easily access them when we're actually encrypting them. So let's go ahead and create a new list called encrypted file names, and we'll do file merge plus the system information E, file merge plus clipboard information E, and finally file merge plus the keys information E. Okay, now that we have that, we have our two lists, and it will make the files easily accessible when we are trying to encrypt them. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a for loop here, which is going to traverse through the files to encrypt and encrypt our files. So for encrypting, this is the element that we will create, or the element that we will. This is the element that we will create, and this is the variable name that we will assign to each position in the list. And we are looking to go through or iterate through the files to encrypt. So what we're going to want to do is open up each file, and we're going to want to read that file. And then we're going to want to add some encryption, and then we are going to want to encrypt that information with the key to the new file, or the E files. And then we want to send the emails with the encrypted file, and then we want to go ahead and do that over and over again until all three files have been encrypted. So it sounds a lot complicated, sounds really complicated, but really it really isn't. So first thing we need to do, open up each file and read the data. To this, we will use the with open block followed by what we want to open. So we're looking to do files to encrypt, and we want to access the first position within the list here. And so we're going to create a default variable called count, and we're going to equal that to 0. So what this will do is it will start out with the 0 position, which is 0 index, which is right here, and then it will go 1 and then 2. So we'll have 3 in total. And we want to write or read a binary. So we want to read the information from this file, and we're going to call it f. And as I said, all we want to do is read the data. So let's just do f.read, and we're going to assign that to the variable data. Now, when it came to finally, encrypting these, and I was in the process, I had to simply look up how to encrypt with the key. And to do this, it's pretty easy. All we have to do is add a little bit of, or add the .encrypt method to encrypt our data with a specified key. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and do fernet equals fernet and then the key here. And for the key, we are going to generate the key right here in our cryptography file, and that's why we have the cryptography file in the first place. But let's ignore that for now. What we're going to want to do also is encrypt the data. So after that, .encrypt data. So with the fernet, we are going to encrypt the data. Now we want to go ahead and append this encrypted data that we read from the blank unencrypted file, and we want to go ahead and append that to the new file. And to do this, we will do the with open encrypted files list starting at index 0, but it will go up as we continue. And we want to go ahead and write binary there, and as f, and we want to go ahead and f.write the encrypted data. So that's going to basically read, encrypt, and then append to a new file. And finally, we want to go ahead and send an email to ourselves so that we can get the encrypted files without any worry. To do this, all we have to do is do encrypted file names followed by the encrypted file names count. So we're just sending the attachment. So this is the file names. And then we want to go ahead and add the to address. And yeah, so that is getting the position of the name, and then it's getting the path and then the to address, and we want to increase the count by 1. So what we're doing here now is increasing the count by 1, so then we will be done with the 0 index and move on to the first index. To end, we will give each iteration, so each time that the keylogger iterates through one iteration, we'll let it sleep for 2 minutes, let's just say, so that we can send the emails and have that properly sent to us without any interruption. Now what we're going to want to do is go up to our cryptography file, and we're going to want to create 2 new files. A generate key in a decrypt file.py program. So the generate key is going to generate the key for us, which then we will put right here. And we will also create a little program which decrypts each of the files so that once we receive the files from our email, we can run our little decryption of the files through this little program so that we don't have to worry about, doing it. I guess you couldn't do it manually, but you get what I mean. So, all right, let's go ahead and create the first one, which is going to be generate key.py under the cryptography directory. And this is going to be really easy. To generate a key, first thing we need to do is import our cryptography library. And we will define a new variable called key, which is going to generate the key. So we'll do fairnet.generate key, in which that just generates the key, as it says. And we will go ahead and create a new file called, let's just call this encryption key.txt, and we'll write to this file, and then we will write the key to the file, and then we will close the file. So every single time you want to generate a new key, all you have to do is just run this little Python program, which will generate a new key for you. Let's go ahead and run this real quick. Boom. So we have our encryption key, which then we can copy, and we can paste this into our keylogger.py. So you see this little key variable here that is highlighted and underscored under with red. We are going to put this up on our default controls, and we will call this key equal to a string of our encryption key. So let's say we want to change our encryption key. We can by just doing and running this little program. Okay, so let's go ahead and create one more little program which will decrypt each of our files. To do this, we will call this the decrypt file.py under the cryptography folder. We are going to import the same exact library as before, and we will give our key variable a blank string. And then we are going to go ahead and we will want to create 3 files, the system information E, clipboard information E, and the keyboard information E, so that we can easily access these. So let's just do that real quick. Okay, so we are going to create yet again another list and assign it to the variable encrypted files. We are going to go ahead and make this list consist of these three files or variables right here. And we will set a default counter to 0. Now we're going to create a for loop which will decrypt each of these files. So let's go ahead and assign a variable name per each position, and we'll call this decrypting file in encrypted files. And what we're going to want to do is basically do the same exact thing as encrypting, except we will be decrypting. So let's go back to our keylogger so we don't have to continue to rewrite code. And go down to our little encrypted files here, and let's go ahead and copy all of what's inside our little for loop, which encrypts the files, and paste this here. Let's go ahead and delete the send email. We don't need to worry about that. And for this, all we need to do is quickly change a few things. So before we do anything, let's go ahead and decrypt our file by just simply doing decrypt, and boom, we are now decrypting our files. Right here, we want to change the files to encrypt to encrypted files, and right here to encrypted files. And I changed the variable name here, decrypted, so we're going to change the variable name as well here. Spelling. And there we go. So now we can add our key, once again, that we just generated into our program here, and we can add our three different files to our file path right here, and we can decrypt those files. So this is a nice little program that does this for us. The next thing that we will do is go ahead and clean up a bit of our things, add a few comments to organize our program, and finish this keylogger. So we're almost done. If we wanted to add our file path into a different location, but we needed to know the username of the specific user that we are targeting, we can use the getPass module to get the username. So to get the username, for instance, we can use username equals getPass, get user, and then we can append this username to our file here, to our file string, if we wanted to. Separate each of these by making some white space, and let's just add a few comments. I made some very generic comments for each section. You can make these a little bit more detailed if needed, but for now and for time consumption, I'm not going to go through and try to get all of these comments detailed. So that's basically it for the keylogger. It was pretty simple to create, and obviously there is many improvements to be made. But I think that it offers a great launchpad and a great start in terms of understanding how to implement different features with modules and libraries through Python. If you want to go ahead and put this into an executable, although it's very tricky and hard, I recommend two solutions. The first one is PyInstaller, which is very hard oftentimes to get to work with these longer scripts, but some people have had success with this particular keylogger with PyInstaller. The other one that we can use is called AutoPy2exe. I have it downloaded. I will have it in the description below. To start AutoPy2exe, after you've downloaded it, just go to your command prompt and do AutoPy2exe to launch it. And we can add our main script file, and we can do some pretty cool things. It's a little easy, little GUI interface, so that we can basically compile this into an executable. This takes a few tries, and for the sake of this crash course, although I probably should be doing it because it's a crash course, that's basically what you would do to make this into an executable. So that is it for the crash course Keylogger. Of course, there's always more improvements that you can build. I thank you guys for watching this video. If you have watched this video, I left you leave a like. No, I'm just joking. But just, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and the way that I have implemented my Keylogger. So until the next video, have a good day.